So.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see so many people here this morning. And you're right, usually when I'm talking about hospice, that's the time that most people don't show up. So thank you for coming out. I know that many of you have experiences with hospice, either in the residence here in St. Catharines or in your own home. But I will just go through quickly for everyone. I just have to take off the got it here.
Yeah.
There it is. And I'll put my slides up.
Yeah. Sorry. So you can go to you're probably more Zoom literate than I am. Yeah, it's there. In fact, it's open already. And then, yeah, you may want to just, I'm not sure if the screen controls will work. No, it doesn't. So slideshow. Oh. And
Here we go. Okay, thank you.
You're good.
Oh, I'm in the dark. Okay, so I'll go through this rather quickly, but I will certainly leave lots of time for questions afterwards. So it's our philosophy at hospice. We want to make sure that we help people live well. And that's something that's a little bit different. We usually talk about hospice with death and dying and bereavement, but really we want to make sure that every day is a day that is the best day for anybody who is under our care. We also want to make sure that nobody travels this journey alone. We're here to help in a number of different ways, and there's no cost to any of our services. And that's a philosophy that we believe we should have these services available for everybody, just as we come into the world with a whole bunch of planning and support and family around us. We also want to make sure that everybody leaves this world in the same way. We support people who are living at home. Often we just help people who are living with a life-limiting illness throughout the course of that illness, from the time of diagnosis all the way through to the end. Certainly wrap ourselves around what that family needs and that person needs, and in their own home. And if they wish to pass in their own home, we have physicians, nurse practitioners, we have counselors that go into the home, as well as our specially trained volunteers, and they can lend a hand. Everybody, I think, in this room probably knows about the 10-bed hospice up on Ontario Street. We provide 24/7 care, again, with nurses, physicians, volunteers, PSWs, and really just try to lift that burden of care so that family members can be together and enjoy all of their time that they have in hospice. We also provide grief and bereavement services for children as young as 5 all the way through to adults. And these programs are now in person, where we do walks and hikes. At any point on a weekend in Niagara, there'll be 20 people walking on one of our paths that we have. And we also do this online as well now. Because of COVID, we've learned how to shift and provide all this virtual care. So we have over 20 programs in grief and bereavement. For our teens, we bring them to a one-day camp where they can begin to meet each other. You can imagine as a teenager, if you've lost somebody who's means something to you and you're not coping well, it's hard to talk about it. So we join them together in a fun day camp where they get to see that they're not the only people or the only kids suffering through this, meet some friends, and then they join our 16-week program after that. And we also support caregivers. So often people want to stay at home as long as possible, but that's also for caregivers. It's so important to keep our caregivers strong and looking after themselves. So we have programs that do that as well, so that caregivers can learn how to take a break. We have our services to help them take a break, take care of yourselves. We help teach them about the health system, how to advocate for yourself, how to get the services that you need. The needs for our programs continue to increase every year by about 45%. However, I think you're all aware that our funding remains the same. So this club has been fabulous in supporting hospice over the years. This was the site of our Hike for Hospice for many, many, many years. And we do all of that fundraising out in the community because we want to keep offering and keep up with this demand We need to keep training new volunteers. We keep having to, expand our programs and services, and we're doing that on a limited budget. So you'll see our Hike for Hospice. We've moved over to the new Canada Games site for our Hike for Hospice. The 5-card draw, you're probably all familiar with that. And we also have our Catch the Ace, and we have a golf tournament coming up as well on June 5th. All of those help to make sure that our programs and services can continue to run. About 5 years ago now, we were watching a trend happening in the St. Catharines Hospice, where 60% of the people that were utilizing those beds were actually from South Niagara. And we were finding that although we were taking 250, 300 people a year into the 10 beds in St. Catharines, we were also turning away as many people as we were providing help. So we were really only hitting the tip of the iceberg with the number of people that required hospice care at end of life. So at that point, the board made a very courageous decision that we would look to open new beds here throughout Niagara. It was not an option to build on our same site. And in fact, we didn't want to do that. Hospices are a big home environment. They're not a hospital setting if you haven't been in one. It really is a place that you walk into. Here in Canada, this is what we focus on, where you really feel like it's your second home. When people come to hospice, they have large rooms, they can stay overnight with their loved one, they can bring in some of their favorite things and pictures and really make it a place to stay. We wanted to make sure that we kept that kind of feeling to our hospice. Now, if you look to the States, they do it a little bit differently. For our partners in Buffalo, for example, they'll have their hospice center, but they have a lot more beds. They'll have 30 to 40 beds. Each still individual rooms. For COVID, I was in England, and completely different philosophy where the hospices offer both single rooms, not very many, but they also offer a ward where there'll be about 4 to 6 people in one ward, like a hospital room, bed after bed, with curtains separating them. And that's how they provide hospice care. So their hospices are quite large. They'll have up to 30 or 40 beds in them as well. And it's just a different philosophy. In England, people prefer to be on a ward so that they're not alone in their room at any point in time. And they would, and that's what most people, how they're used to receiving hospice care. In England. Also in England, they're funded completely different as they are in the States. So in England, every healthcare service is under the National Healthcare Service. So it's one organization that provides all of that funding to all of the hospices. The really interesting thing was I was there prior to COVID, and they were already experiencing a nursing crisis in England, and they were actually closing some of their hospice beds because they weren't able to staff them appropriately. Then COVID hit. Now we are seeing, which I think we would have seen anyway, an RN crisis here in Canada, but now it is certainly exacerbated by what happened through COVID. And now the number of people wanting to leave. What time for us to be expanding? However, nurses and PSWs working in hospice, where you have 10 people under your care, who you get to know the families, you get to know the person you're caring for, and you get to provide the care how they want it, exactly what those people would like. Somebody wakes up in the morning and they decide they want to have lobster or iceberg lettuce. You know what? We make sure it happens. We had somebody who wanted to do a last visit to the beach. We make sure that happens. We had somebody who wanted to go to Walmart for one last time. We made sure that happens. So as the professional providing those services, it is so fulfilling in your career to be able to do that kind of care that when you wanted to become a nurse, or you wanted to become a PSW, or you wanted to become a social worker like I am, that you're actually able to connect with people and provide them that sense of being able to determine what is good for them, that dignity and that compassion. So we're hoping and strategizing as we open 20 new hospice beds, that we'll see a lot of the nursing staff, PSWs, and professionals that are currently working in other settings in healthcare, like long-term care and hospitals, migrate over to these new settings. And I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. So back to what I was saying, we're building. We decided, because we were seeing so many people from the south, and we were approached by the Niagara Health System and the region, because in Fort Erie, they knew they would be losing their palliative care unit. And there's not many palliative care units in Niagara. There are the 5 to 6 beds in Fort Erie. There's another 5 beds at Hotel du Shaver. And Niagara Falls also has about 5 beds. So with a new hospital being built in Niagara Falls, Fort Erie was going to lose. Fort Erie wasn't a place top of our mind to build a hospice, the next hospice built in Niagara. However, it was important that those services remain in that community. And it was also important for us to reach out to a community that has a different demographic. So they are an at-risk community in Fort Erie. There's not a lot of other services there. They have a lower economic level. How would those people ever access a hospice outside of their own community? So for our board and for myself and my team, it became important that we look at how do we make sure there is equitable access to everybody in Niagara to hospice care, because everybody deserves that same level of care at end of life. So we committed to building in Fort Erie. Next thing that happened was I was in a series of meetings with a number of my colleagues, and it so happened in Welland that Foyer Richelieu, which is a long-term care home, not-for-profit organization in Welland, was building a new long-term care home, and they had half a floor, roughly 16,000 square feet available, and didn't know what to do with it. And I said, oh, I know what I could do with that. I could put a hospice in there. So back to the board, thinking that this is a crazy plan to build 2 new hospice centers, approved by the board, and it was approved by the ministry. And both of these bills were fast-tracked through the community. One, because at that time, Niagara was spending $18 million a year in palliative care in the hospital system. And the only way to decrease that is to pull people from the hospital and offer them to stay at home with support or to bring them into a hospice setting. And as well, both bills, one in a marginalized community and another in an integration that has never been done in Ontario before. Building in a long-term care home where we are 2 organizations who are completely separate, but building in the same build. I have to say Foyer Richelieu has been a fabulous partner, because although both the long-term care ministry and the Ministry of Health, which were joined when we started and separated after that, are incredibly supportive, it has been an uphill climb. Because although a government, and any government would say, we want to save costs, capital build costs, and we want you to integrate as healthcare system, there is nothing in the system that supports this kind of integration. So we've just been uphill, having to negotiate different kinds of contracts, having to educate people in the ministry over and over again in order to keep the project moving forward. So we will have this roughly 20 to 30-minute drive from anywhere in Niagara. And I can say we are incredibly lucky to have this. I look to Buffalo, people are driving 1.5 hours to 2 hours to get to a hospice bed. And they believe that to be good service because they would reflect back, how far would you drive for this kind of care? Same thing when you look over into England, where one community will have one hospice facility, although it's bigger, you have to drive 2.5 to 3 hours to get to the next hospice in that community. So in Niagara, incredibly lucky that we will have 30 beds throughout the entire region. 20 to 30-minute drive to a local hospice. I live in Wainfleet, which is probably the furthest drive. Other than that, we're doing pretty well. This is the Welland site where we have large rooms. Welland will have a little bit of a specialty that we have planned for people who have more serious mobility issues, where we maybe need to use overhead lifts. So each room at this point is planned to have an overhead lift. So even somebody living in St. Catharines who needs that service may be recommended for the Welland Hospice. But you can see the rooms have large doors, patios outside. We believe that when you're at hospice, if you're bedbound, you should be able to get to anywhere inside or outside the building. So that's how we've designed them. We also have this large family change room for people, caregivers who maybe haven't had a chance to take a break themselves, to have a little bit of a spa experience so that they can regenerate themselves. We also have in both new hospices, as well as in St. Catharines, a tub room, a spa room for our residents who stay with us. Anybody of our caregivers, we know that bathing and showering becomes more and more difficult. Often when people come to hospice, it's the first time they've been able to have a bath in quite a while. So we want to make this a wonderful experience for them. And actually in this spa room, we will have a fireplace as well. We have lots of family and dining space, lots of quiet rooms, areas where families can take a break. We have children's rooms where children can play and take a break as well, and time for other families to get together. When you're staying at hospice and you're there 24/7, you start to meet other people, which is a good thing. It's good to be able to talk to somebody who's traveling that same journey as you are. So we want to have a nice, relaxing space where families can come together. We always make sure there's a warm pot of soup on for everybody, as well as some snacks available. This is the Fort Erie site. It was the architect really took a liking when we said Fort Erie, and we talked about early on the War of 1812 that happened in that area. And so he kind of prided himself that it looks a little bit like a fort. So we're going with it. It's quite a beautiful building. We are on the same property as a new build, Gilmore Lodge, which is a long-term care home. Gilmore Lodge is a regional home, much the same as we have in St. Catharines, where we are on the same site as the regional home, Lynn Haven. So this property is owned by the region. They have donated to us. It's quite a small parcel, so we've had to be a little bit creative. But again, another integration opportunity. We're on the same land as a long-term care home. Same setup with the rooms, but in Fort Erie, we did a lot of outreach with the community, a lot of engagement to find out what was important for people living in Fort Erie. And they really believed it was making sure that people felt the outdoors inside. So in Fort Erie, because we were restricted for the land, we will have 2 internal courtyards and a second floor terrace that will make people feel like they're living outside. There's one of our courtyards. They're available, or they're visible to all of the rooms, as well as to our staff. It's really important to take care of staff who are working with death and dying every day, making sure that they have what they need so that they can be their best on their job. So we're hoping with this expansion that we will serve over 900 people a year in our hospice residences. We will increase 3 times to 3,700-ish people that will help in their own homes. That's our largest service because most people want to remain at home at end of life. And we'll increase our bereavement. We'll probably double that to about 800 people a year, if not a little bit more. Volunteers. We do have 350 volunteers right now that help out the Stabler Center. This is one of the important reasons why we can keep running our services on the fixed income that we get from the ministry. Right now, we have volunteers working in every part of our organization. They help out in the residence, they help out in the kitchen, they welcome you when you come in, they visit with people in their rooms, they help people in their own homes, They run most of our bereavement groups and programs with specialized training that we provide them. They help out in our administrative offices. They help with the Smile Cookie campaign by decorating those cookies with Tim Hortons with us. They help us out at every fundraising event. So volunteers are so critical to our organization, and we hope that in each new community, we will have at least 300 volunteers to help out in those new hospices. We are an important economic partner here in Niagara. We will add over $1 million annually to our economic business model here. We really pride ourselves in sourcing everything as local as we can get it. Everything that we buy is local. All of our supports, all of our contracts that we have, our maintenance contracts are all locally negotiated. So with these new healthcare impacts, we certainly hope to be able to reduce the cost that we see in palliative care in our Niagara hospitals. We really believe hospitals play an important role in healthcare, but it's not the place where most people do well at end of life. So as much as people would like to come to hospice from hospital, if they're able to, we want to make sure that we have room for them. We hope we are modeling a future build in Ontario, a different way to build hospices that the Ontario government is looking at, and hopefully it can be trended into other smaller communities that maybe can't afford to build a standalone hospice, and maybe there's an opportunity to build with another not-for-profit partner. We're looking at how we can provide sustainable growth to an organization on that fixed budget. And so we're looking to how can all of those communities like St. Catharines, like this club, has continued to give to the organization annually so that we can continue to run our services. And we're, of course, reducing our hospital spending, looking at how we can support long-term care homes and how we can continue to wrap our services around everybody that needs our care. We are now breaking ground in Welland. May 2nd is our breaking ground ceremony. I'd love to say that we're there from our capital campaign, but we're not. That's my big ask of everybody today. We're trying to reach our shortfall of $2 million in Welland. So Pamela is back with me. She's our manager in charge of the capital campaign. And please look online. Go to just our website, hospiceniagara.ca. You'll be able to donate to the capital campaign online, or you can speak to Pamela about how you can help and how you can also go out and ask your friends. We have all that kind of material, and maybe there's a group of people that can donate together. It's really important for everybody in the region to support these builds. At the time when St. Catharines, years ago, now 17 years ago, was building the hospice here, first of all, nobody in the region had heard about hospice. Nobody knew what it was, but the entire region helped to build this resource. And the entire region has helped sustain these 10 beds in St. Catharines. So now it's time for St. Catharines community to look beyond its borders and help these other hospices come to fruition as well. Fort Erie, we're still in the planning phase. It will probably roll out sometime in 2025. And again, I think many people in the room know the difference that hospice makes in people's lives. We really believe and are committed to the vision of providing this care for everyone in our region. And we really believe it's a measure of our own humanity and of our society when we can care for people with compassion and dignity at end of life. As I said, much in the same way as when we enter this world. We are all owed that. Our families and our loved ones are owed this kind of care and this support at end of life. These are all the ways that you can help, but they're all on our website. Please, if you don't have one of these handouts, we'd love for you to take that home. And there's our website for the capital campaign, Hospice Niagara, close-to-home.ca. If you'd like to find out more, like to see where the buildings are at, any new information we will continue to post, and that's where you can donate as well. So thank you. Questions?
Just for a second, I've got a roving mic. I'll use that to get to any questioners here, and we'll cancel your screen share. And
Thank you.
this is just so that any, well, people here can hear. And so go ahead.
Great. Yes.
Say, Art, hang on.
I invite Jackie Herman, one of the three founding women of Hospice here in Nagy, I would just address you. One of our members, Bob A, died a year ago, and his family made a major donation to Hospice. And I attended a Rotary Lakeshore meeting on his home, and their son Derek was given a Paul Harris for that donation. Want to explain something about that donation?
Absolutely. So we're very lucky to have that the Rotary Club support that donation. What we were able to do at St. Catharines is there's always a number of room naming opportunities when you build a hospice. And we have those available right now in the Welland and in the Fort Erie site. But we had a children's room that we recently renovated, and a music therapy program that we've recently added to the children's program, and they were unnamed. So we were able to honor his memory by naming the room with the Rotary Club. And we also then were lucky that the Rotary Club supported that music therapy continuing to work with the kids. So that was very special, Art. Thank you.
And Carol, just to clarify, you mentioned this club and donations. I believe you're referring to the Grantham Lions Club.
I am.
On the hall.
Well, the hall, but you're PROBUS. My apologies. Yes.
That's fine, but just
Yeah.
in case the gentleman thought that our PROBUS club had changed its stripes, was we don't fundraise. That's one of the things we do, but we're happy to have you here.
Well, the Lions Club was great in letting us run our mic here, so thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. I have a question though, with regard to what criteria do you use for admitting of people? Like you mentioned that a number of people you have to throw away.
That's a great question. So what happens is every week, every single week, through COVID or not, every single week, our clinical team, which is our physician, myself, director of care, our senior director, pharmacist, nursing staff, get together and we review every person who is on the wait list for hospice. So we also encourage people to get on our wait list early, even if you don't think you need it right away. So we are able to review and monitor what's happening with everybody who's waiting for a hospice bed. And then we look at where is that person in their illness trajectory. You can imagine with over 500 people a week waiting for a hospice bed, that we are often having to take people who are at the end stages, unfortunately. I'm hoping that changes with 30 beds across the region. But we also make sure that everybody has the in-home services that they require as well. So we make sure everything's in place while they're waiting. And then we take and look at who has a complicated illness, who maybe isn't the best candidate to stay at home, who's at risk maybe for going to emergency because of the nature of the way the illness is happening. And we try to take those people into hospice. What's the family situation? So if somebody was at home and they had young children, a home death is likely not something that those people would want. So we look at that situation. Who's at home alone, who doesn't have a care provider? Those people might be prioritized as well. And we just individually go through with what we know and try to make the best decisions that we can when we only have 10 beds available. And this is why people with cancer tend to be most often the ones that are coming into hospice, because cancer has more of a predictable trajectory. Where if you look at other illnesses like ALS, which tends to be a slower decline, or you're looking at anything as far as heart disease, they tend to be a little bit less predictable. But again, with 30 beds in Niagara, I'm hoping that we can start to serve different populations of people with illnesses, as well as take people earlier than the last couple of weeks. Right now, the average length of stay is about 2 weeks in St. Catharines.
How effective is the change the age?
Oh, Art, hang on a second.
Effective is your change the age campaign going?
Our Chase the Ace has been very effective, although it was caught quite early this round. And what makes it successful is the community. So we, really the hospice isn't ours, it is the community. And we have spent years building that community strength, that brand out in the community. So when we launched that, we had a really healthy donor group. And we also had all the technology in place to make sure that it could be successful. So I know that clubs often think about that, but there's certain kind of steps that you should think about as you launch those kinds of campaigns. Game of chance though. If it's caught in the first couple of weeks, you're losing money. Yeah.
Two comments. One thing, I've never heard anything but positive state comments. The other thing is that we lost 2 family members in hospices, one in Beaverton and one in Stratford. One of my daughter and my father, were experienced, but I know I think it's satisfied with the care. So it certainly is.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish every community in Niagara, throughout Ontario had a hospice. Regardless of the size, they can be 3 beds, they can be 6 beds, they can be 10 beds, but every community in Ontario, in Canada, needs a hospice.
I think there's another question over here. Oh, no, not a question. Oh, any questions from the folks on Zoom?
Okay, I'm going to remind. Oh,
Sorry, we got one more right here. Excuse me, Rod, you're ahead.
Just wondering what your volunteers, are you looking for volunteers? Is it difficult to become volunteers?
That's great. So yes, we are always looking for volunteers. One of the first steps is to think about what you're good at. What are your ideas? How do you think you can contribute? Because we're always open to what people bring to us. We don't tell you, we build on what strengths you have. If you're doing any client-facing work, so if you're going to be involved with one of our residents or with somebody in their home, then you'll go through a specialized training program, which is both online and in person. And it's about, I don't know off the top of my head, I'm going to say about 30 hours, but a lot of that's online and 3 sessions, because we want to make sure that our volunteers are well trained, able to manage any kind of situation. We certainly make sure they're supported, but working in death and dying and bereavement requires specialized training. If you would like to be an administrative volunteer, kitchen volunteer, or a fundraising volunteer, it's much faster. So you just call us. We will do the proper orientation to whichever one you're interested in, and then we get you started. And volunteers decide how many hours a week that they have available that they can donate to us, and which days of the week. Some of them are away in Florida half the year. That's okay. We really try to accommodate our volunteer schedule because you're such an important part of our organization. Oh, so just go online. I'd like to volunteer, and you'll find it. Thank you very much for having me out. Is there another question? Okay, I'm just going to say thank you, and I'm going to remind everybody, check out our website, hospiceniagara.ca, or the Close to Home campaign. We're really looking for everyone's help to finish off this build in Welland so that we can then focus on Fort Erie.
It falls to me